and everything. But from here on out, we are live. Hello, world.
Hello.
And I have shared in our chat here the pop-out chat in our Google Hangouts chat. You can click on that, and then that should take you to the YouTube live chat. Feel free to let whoever here is not talking or not, otherwise engaged to say anything that goes there. Don't feel any obligation to. I know for me specifically, it's not something I cannot focus on two things at once. So like I'm either in the chat or I'm there. And we got Murr in the chat, so we have some folks here.
Yeah, but Murr's always here. I mean, that's just a given. Come on.
Champion of the 2016 board gaming decathlon. Murr.
Yeah. Awesomeness.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we've got a full show tonight. So let's get it going here. Let's get this show on the road. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. A special episode here. It's the bicentennial episode, The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, episode number 200. And for this occasion, we have a special guest host, designer Tom Russell, also publisher Tom Russell. Also, what else? What am I missing here, Tom?
I mean, that about covers it.
Artist Tom Russell.
Husband Tom Russell.
Host of the podcast, Tom and Mary Tom Russell.
That's true. Yeah, we do a few things, and I do some of the graphic design for some of the games, so I do that too. But designer, a co-publisher, because it's me and my wife Mary that run the company, and Mary's kind of the one that runs the company.
So, not business manager Tom Russell, it'd be business manager Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all right. My wife's an accounting professor. Before we even got married, I came up. She's like, so I analyzed all your debt, and I know how we can repay it in 4 years. And I'm just like, I'm just going to give you my paycheck, and you tell me what my play money is, okay?
Well, there's a reason why the company's called Hollandspiel and not Russell Spiel.
So why don't we have Mary on the podcast?
Good. Hey, you said Mary's in the other.
Can we get her on?
In the other room. She's usually very camera shy, and she's watching Topsy Turvy right now, the Mike Leigh film. So I'm gonna leave her be.
Yes, this is
a great film.
Mm-hmm. Self-care is very important. So maybe in a future episode we can get Mary on here as well, because it sounds like. As far as the business side, the trade secrets might come more from Mary than from you, Tom. So welcome to the show, and thanks for being here, and thanks for being on this special episode. I'm very excited to have you here. I know that we have been talking about what we want to say to you. We've been sharing that each of us has got some questions we want to ask, and my take on it was that we've got enough to keep you up all night, and probably more than you would have the energy, or would any audience have the energy to persevere throughout. So,
okay.
Don't worry, we'll keep it shorter than a Joe's Top 10 list.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. My top 10 lists are a lie, so Andy's right there. Like there's not 10 games on any list. Any top 10 I've ever done is always yes, I deserve it.
Actually, a top 28 list with 56 honorable mentions.
Well, it's better than my list where I have like most disappointing game, top 10, 2 honorable mentions, games my wife won't play with me ever, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we could all get better in some ways. And any time that I've got some negative qualities, I love for you guys to point them out. And the bitterness comes out, salty. Here we're just gonna be very sarcastic on this episode, because you've been with us for 200 episodes. This is finally time for us to speak our minds. We're gonna be sweet and fun.
I'm already.
Or if you stuck with this podcast for 200 episodes, there's nothing we can see at this point to make you stop.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go there. We got a whole audience that's like challenge accepted, and our subscribers plummet.
Plummet. Thanks,
Yeah.
TC. You're awesome.
Yeah, you're the bomb. So we are going to run this like the normal show. We're going to be reviewing games. Tom has a game that I'm very interested to hear about, and will be joining us in that segment together with our hype segment, which follows the interview together with Tom, who, as mentioned before, publishes games together with his wife Mary under the label Hollandspiel, as well as has designed a you're getting into lots of designs, like designs that have been picked up by companies outside of, several companies outside of Hollandspiel. Do you have a number on how many designs you're at potentially, Tom? I mean, I've been seeing more and more all the time.
I mean, This Guilty Land was number 40 that's been published. So whatever I've done, like there's been like 2 or 3 come out since then. There'll be more coming out this year. So
you hear that, Dr. Reiner Knizia? Yeah, best be getting in the office. You got somebody on your tail here. Just, you got a ways to go, Tom. But I'm excited.
I was talking with Mary about this a week or 2 ago. That so far, I think that of my games, This Guilty Land is the best one, and I think it's going to be the best one. And I've got maybe another 210 games.
I played better games from Hollandspiel than that. I just want to put that out there. I disagree. The guy who owns the company. Just okay. Well, I'm being salty. Sorry, I just throw that out there.
But I before I get like retirement age, I'll probably get another 210 games out there for like 250 total. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm going to top that one in my estimation. Everyone has a different opinion, of course.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I do a few games a year.
Well, certainly that's quite an output already. So we will get into the designs and your philosophy, your background. And which of the Jimmy Dean breakfast frittatas you enjoy the most in the morning.
I'm not familiar with any of those. Jimmy.
Oh, all right. So, well, it's about time you learn, Tom, because this was on last week. We actually took a break for the episode, and so I just slapped together some unsolicited reviews.
Oh my God, Joe!
I don't think anybody's.
No, wait, hold on. The picture you put on Punchboard Media for that, when I was scrolling through the feed, I was like, what is wrong with Joe with this picture?
Yeah. You got to see it. It's the worst picture of me. I was just like, this episode, I don't want anybody to listen to it expecting anything, so I just found the worst picture of me that I could. And it actually is a picture of Andy, but it looks like me. And...
No, when I was like the awkward-looking nerd in high school, that's what it was.
I honestly don't know what it was. I'm still trying to figure out what it is.
Don't think too hard about it, TC.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But I slapped in a review there, Tom, of Jimmy Dean's breakfast frittatas because that's what people have, of course, been asking for. That's what people want to hear all about. So we were going to put together some real content. Yeah, unsolicited reviews. The real unsolicited side. So tonight's content is going to raise the bar. The bar had actually dropped onto the floor, so it's going to place the bar back on the chart and raise it significantly. But yeah, that was on last week's not real episode. So now we're back in the office, back to putting out what you're listening for. Anyway, you're listening to this podcast thanks to Game Surplus, the sponsor of The Good, the Board, and the Ugly. Check them out at GameSurplus.com, bringing the world of board games to you. You can also find out some codes for discounts from the podcast pick section. Check them out. Tell Carmen and Elaine that The Good, the Board, and the Ugly sent you to GameSurplus.com. So let's get kicked off here. Tom, I am loving to hear about this deck building game, ? It certainly is interesting looking to me. But let's kick off our review section. Tom, tell us a little bit about SPQF.
So SPQF is a game by Grant Rodiak, and this is a game that I've I've now played it twice. I would rather have played it more times before, giving a review. But there's that old chestnut that once you start working on games, you pretty much only play your own games, and that's more or less true. I played this last year when it came out with 3 other guys, and I think I enjoyed it more than they did. And I played it yesterday with Mary, and I think we enjoyed it more at 2-player than we did at 4. But I think it has, from talking to people, kind of a reputation for being hard to get into. I didn't find it that hard to get into, or that obtuse. I mean, I think some of the rules could be written a little bit better, but I mean, really, the game's not as difficult to get into as I think people believe it to be. But basically, it's a deck building game. On your turn, you play a card for an action. There are symbols on the cards, and you play other cards matching that symbol from your hand to boost the action. Other players can play a card of the same type, same symbol, to follow the action, which is something we've seen in other games before. What's unique about this one is that any cards you don't play go in front of you in what's called a trade row. So every player has a trade row, and there's a common trade row. And at the end of your turn, when you get a new card in your hand, in your deck, you take it from any trade row that's not yours. So you are doing the deck building, and you're taking cards from potentially from other players, unless you're playing with Mary, because she said I'm not allowed to take her cards, and she would cover them up.
She has the cat sit on them.
Yeah. But it moves real quick. It's a 45-minute game. I really enjoy it. There are cute... Pardon, Mary? I did take some of your cards. That's true. So yeah, it's I enjoy it. It's he kickstarted it, and I don't usually do the Kickstarters. I think I've done like 5 Kickstarters in 10 years. So
wow.
This was one of them, and yeah, I got a lot of enjoyment. I look forward to playing it again. You have lots of card combos and whatnot, all the stuff that you like from card games and deck builders, and it moves pretty quick. It's very much, I think, like a racing game. You're trying to run through victory points and score the most. So it's a bit more Euro-y than the kind of stuff I put out, but I like to play those games once in a while. So that's my 2 cents on SPQF, and I think it's worth playing.
Well, Tom, when you mentioned that it's a bit more Euro-y than the stuff you put out, that it's interesting to me that you have a spectrum on which you quantify or qualify the stuff you put out that actually falls on the same time space continuum as Euros. There's something very interesting and unique about your designs, and you will certainly cover this more in depth, but when you mention that this is more of a Euro-y style game, the deck building game that has sort of a play a card, take the action on the card, other people follow, that I think of is Eminent Domain, one that I know.
Love that game.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was wondering. So, and Trent and I do as well. I think Andy even, Andy is allergic to Euros, and it's one that I'm pretty sure that he actually plays. So.
Yeah, I would say I probably like Eminent Domain a little more, but I played Eminent Domain about, 40, 50 times, and I played this twice. So it's early days.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like a very compact game. I know.
Yeah, it's a little too compact. The stuff doesn't all quite fit back in there the way I like it to. I don't sleeve cards; they're just in there with rubber bands. But it's kind of to stuff the stuff in there. I would like the box to be a little bit bigger. But it is a tiny box. It's portable in that sense. So it's nice.
Very cool. Well, thanks for letting us know about SPQF. I believe that game actually exists in our group here. I've loved Grant Rodiak's other designs. I know that it wasn't entirely him because there was some other cooks in the kitchen, but I really like Cry Havoc and especially some of the core ideas of what it was looking to do for a faction sort of deck building dudes on a map game. And also really love a game that he kickstarted, and I feel like I was one of only 50 people to participate in this Kickstarter, but it was a game called Druids that was all made out of laser cut wood, and it's an abstract that works really well with 2 players. So Grant puts out some really cool designs, and now you've made me want to really try SPQF, especially since you say it compares at least somewhat to Eminent Domain, which I think is a grandiose title in that sort of design space.
Yeah. It's the first game by Rodic that I played.
Okay.
But I am looking forward to playing more on the strength of it. So
very cool. Thank you. So let's get into let's go dive deep into a specific faction of the counterinsurgency. I don't want to say light, but like an answer to coin counterinsurgency games, the game Root. And Andy, which faction are you going to be telling us about?
Well, yeah, I'm telling you about a faction because, I've not played many new games the last few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to teach a couple people that are kind of new coming to our game group, Root. And I kind of had them play the more standard factions that you get in the box. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try the Lizard Cult. Because, everyone's like, oh, they never win. I'm like, okay, well, But I had actually upgraded mine to like the 3.0 version where they're supposed to kind of beef them up a little bit. I found them really interesting. It kind of felt like going from sort of Terra Mystica, the base game, to Terra Mystica with the expansion, where you're kind of familiar with everything, but it's trying to do what it's trying to do in much more oddball ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so like with the Lizard Cult, I was basically putting warriors out in people's clearings. I'm not going to go over all the base rules of Root with this, but I was basically putting my warriors, people would have like groups of 3 or 4 in one clearing, and I'd put 2 there. And they're just like, what are you doing? We're going to kill them. I'm like, yes, I want you to. Because, being a set, the Lizard Cult's kind of like, based on a religious way of doing thing. If they kill your warriors, then they become martyrs to the cause and go into a little box where you can then, use them to take special actions. And so, when I got some together, like one of the actions you can take is basically like remove 3 of your little martyr lizards and just like axe somebody's building on the map and replace it with one of your own. And then furthermore, with the Lizard Cult, if you have a building in the clearing, you own it. It doesn't matter how much of anything else is in there. So, basically they allowed me to do that. I just like popped in on someone's big area and started putting out things and getting them to, sacrifice more of my people and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a very quirky faction. Like I definitely would not recommend that somebody new to Root try to play this one because it's weird. Basically another thing that happens is like all the cards that get played by other people that are going to be discarded first go to the Lizard Cult. And then based on the suit of those cards, they basically have a certain cleric type that they don't like. And
they hated Outcast.
Hate clearings. And that like gives you the ability to affect bunny clearings more profoundly, I guess is the way to put it. So, yeah.
Those bunnies. Ugh.
Yeah, well, it's really neat because, like, usually in Root, you have to, like, spawn people at recruitment points and then move them around. But with the Lizard Cult, it's just like, I play a fox card. Oh, I'll put a warrior over there. They're like, how are you putting warriors out on, like, completely disconnected areas of the map? And I'm like, it's what I do. So if you like those kind of quirky factions, this would be the one to play in Root. The one thing, I would recommend based on what I saw kind of like, quote unquote, upgrading my boards, because they give, on BGG, they have stickers you can print to upgrade it to what's going to be the new version. Don't play the Lizard Cult unless you've upgraded the boards, because like they were not balanced well initially, I guess. So, when they really analyzed it, like their win percentage compared to the other factions was like less than 10% or something. But I really felt like with the changes, I was being pretty competitive in the sense that everyone who was playing it was fairly new to Root but me, but I was playing a new faction, and we were all about the same points at the end. So, when I looked at everybody when we were done, I said, this means only one of two things. We were all playing really, really well, or we were all playing really, really not well. But my point total was pretty comparable to everybody else's. So I think the fixes they made to the Lizard Cult's going to make them a little bit more viable and interesting. So, yeah, if you haven't played Root yet and you like that kind of thing, go ahead and do it. Everybody thought the game was, quote unquote, really cute. And then it was funny because the new people playing it, like Root's a pretty confrontational game. They're like, oh, they're so cute. And then just like, I'm going to go attack you. Like they were really into it, which is really fun to see.
I just want to say right quick that I got a game into Root last night. And I finally got to play the Vagabonds, and I think that faction was tailored specifically for me.
Yeah, that's a TC.
Nothing gave me greater pleasure than playing with a control freak, making an alliance with them, and going, "Oh, your troops, I can move them over here now." Boom! Oh, they were so pissed. It was such a good feeling. And then I aligned with them. I made an alliance with them where if they win, I won, and they didn't like that very much either.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess that somebody else won.
No, actually, he pulled it off. He just didn't want to share the victory with me.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
Wow, nice call.
I don't want sharing a victory with you. I'm like, yeah, we're gonna do it anyway. I'm your buddy.
Hey.
Yeah. So yeah,
Nice.
I was called a trash panda, and it was a glorious game. And I think by far that is it's such a great game. I just want to. I'm looking forward to the Lizard folks, but I just wanted to throw that in that the Vagabonds are the TC faction of that game.
Yeah.
You have some bad there, Tom? You have some bad there?
Oh, I played Root 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I played the Erie every time, and I'm terrible at it. I just
programming your cards.
The guy that won the game that we were playing in was playing the Erie, and literally his government did not collapse. Like that guy in the group's a really good forward thinker.
Yeah. No, it always collapses for me. Yeah.
Yeah, he said basically, he's like, I was probably one round from collapsing, but he won before it happened.
Yeah, there is a point where it pretty much has to happen unless people make it possible for you to not collapse.
Yeah.
By killing your stuff.
Well, if you have a trash panda helping you out, it helps. I promise.
The other thing you can do, though, with the Vagabond that's fun is the one time I played him, I was a little bit confrontational, but I built up like this crafting kind of combo thing with them. And then someone's like, how did you craft like 6 items to win? I'm like, I had lots of hammers.
Yeah. And when I played the Vagabonds, like the first round, I just attacked the cats. Why? Because I don't like you. You're my nemesis. You are now officially. We're hostile. Just
you attacked
them sitting in every clearing, and they're practically asking for it.
Yeah, I just went there first round. I was like, okay, one of you 3 guys aren't going to be my ally. I choose you, cats. Why? Because there's a lot of orange on the board. I'm just going after you.
I end up playing the cats. Like I think I played maybe 6 times, and I think I've been the cats 4 of those times. So I think actually maybe all but one. I might have gotten a game in with something besides the cats, but I'm always playing the cats. And TC, that is a fallacy. Your initial view of the board, it is a very precarious position for the cats. You have like a person, cat in every clearing, and that is horrible. That is impossible to defend. It just makes it easy for everybody else to get their, especially the Erie gets their easy free victory from your single kitty that's just sitting there not bothering anybody.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You know what's really awesome is when you pick on someone like the cats and they get real angry and you just hide to the forest and they can't get you. That's fun too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You sound like a really fun vagabond, TC.
Oh yeah,
sounds great.
It'd be interesting to see you play. I've never seen the Vagabond ally with another player, and I've never seen the Vagabond win. But then again, every time we're playing it, I feel like we're having somebody besides the Vagabond in our game because we got people who want to play the weirdo wizard, not wizard.
The birds, the Erie, were like, they were getting ready to collapse, and they were like in last place. And if I was like, look, if we ally and I prevent you from collapsing, we can win the game together. Because I don't want you helping me. I'm like, too bad, it's going to happen anyway. I'm going to make sure you don't collapse. And we pulled it off. And we won. Yeah, we won together. He's like, no, that's not fair. I'm like, no, right here in the rule book, we win together.
You saved him too, and he didn't even want to carry you to the win. He's like, I'll stand on your shoulders, but I won't take the win with you. Like, what?
Yeah, it was just funny. It was just on principle. The Lord of Chaos helping you for a win is not really something you want to be entirely proud of.
Yeah, I guess I don't blame him for that. Well, TC, I missed a transition earlier in the show because Tom had mentioned sort of where on the Euro spectrum the design of SPQF lied in relation to his designs. But I was wondering, you're going to be talking about a game where I've heard you mention this sort of same spectrum where you're not really sure if you what your feelings are about this game because it might lie more on the spectrum than where you're comfortable playing at. So I'll let you tell everybody what we're talking about.
Okay. Yes, I have officially made my peace with SpaceCorp. So SpaceCorp is a GMT game designed by John Butterfield, I believe. We were talking about it earlier. I know I haven't been on the podcast a while because I've been running Keyforge tournaments, but we were talking about it earlier, how you guys were like, well, it's not entirely a Euro game, so we're not what to make of it. I'm like, wow, that's weird, because when I was buying into this game to begin with, I was expecting a traditional Butterfield design, which is primarily a solitaire war game. Mm-hmm. So, we guys were talking about how it just completely almost failed as an economic game. I'm like, okay, this is interesting because, of course, I was waiting to get my copy to make sure I had the correct cards in it because apparently the first run had some production issues. So I managed to play this game 4 times, one at every single player count, in a solitaire, 2-player, 3-player, and 4-player. My final take on it is I am almost entirely convinced that this was primarily designed as a solitaire game because this game plays fantastic as a solo game. It is, usually when you say GMT solo game, you're thinking, oh, good Lord, there's a coin game. We've got flowcharts out the wazoo. There's like exceptions. I got to break out this book and follow every action that the bot's going to take. No, what you do with the SpaceCorp is you take one of the other eras and there's a little bit of a setup to it. And you just flip the card over and read the bottom because the very bottom has what the competition's going to do. And it's really straightforward, really tight, and surprisingly competitive, and there's even variants to make it harder there, where you can make things a little bit more difficult, if you can imagine that. So my final take on it is that it was primarily designed as a solitaire game with a multiplayer thrown on top of it. Now, playing it at 3 and 4, this game is hugely swingy and really random. They mitigate that a bit with the card with the offer, so you can actually see what you're doing. But typically, when you're drawing cards at the end of your turn, you're drawing blind. So there's a luck of a draw. You can kind of get what you're wanting. There's the flip of the tiles, and I've listened to other podcasts and other reviewers. I've heard anything from Game of the Year to Milquetoast Euro to describe this game. So I'm like, I'm gonna just throw it to my group and see what they think. My wife loves it. She likes it a lot. In fact, she even sent you a post on Instagram, Joe, I believe, to show you how badly she crushed me just because she wanted to show you. She was like just crushing me. There was like a 21-point spread going into the third era. I did manage to tie the score at one point just to tell you how radically the game can swing in a particular direction if you know what's going on. But overall, I really, really enjoy this as a solitaire game. I think it's a stronger solitaire game than a multiplayer game. I don't mind playing it multiplayer. I do like it made some interesting concessions where you can, like, if someone's like building their infra board, you can be like, you know what? I'm using your infra to launch into space because your movement's shielded and mine's not because I never drew it. That's an interesting way to get around card draws. However, there was a game where exploration tile I drew was like, oh, I'm gonna explore here. Oh, lose $2 trillion and it's pirates and draw another tile or some other bad thing happened. I was like, I drew 3 of those in a row. I was like, some bad event. But I think for what it is, it works really well. Everyone I played it with enjoyed it. It is not a war game and it is not a Euro game. And now, I mean, not an economic game, but it is a really fun exploration game. It's like a 4X game without the extermination. And so, at the end of the day, I like it for what it is. I will probably play it quite a bit more, but it's I think I've made my peace with it. It's like, I don't think it's a game that would rank on the top 10 or anything, but it's a game I enjoy playing. So that's SpaceCorp.
How does that resonate with those of you that have played the game?
I'd agree. I think he pretty much nails it.
So John Butterfield, solo designer in the past, has made what sounds like to be exclusively solo games, TC, and it sounds like this game works best solo.
But it does function as a multiplayer game. It's just, it's just like you can't go in going, I'm going to play this and like blow someone up. No, you got to go play and be like, okay, I got to outmaneuver the other person. Yeah. And it's fun exploring. So I think I was listening to someone say they absolutely did not like the third era. I really enjoyed that, where you're like exploring the whole different star systems and you like have to like do this insane movement to get there. And then you have to like spend time getting to the star and then you explore everything at once. I really like that third era a lot. And once you get to that point, it's pretty cool. Honestly, my biggest complaint about it is I wish instead of having cubes that were your team, they were like plastic rocket ships or something. Just something a little bit, I can just move it on the board and go and make noise,
make the mouth noises. Okay. Yeah. I get exactly what you're missing.
Yeah. And I think our workaround is going to be, I think you can buy some extra pieces for Alien Frontiers, the little old school rocket ships. I think we're just going to order a few of those and just use those. But, I still enjoyed it quite a bit. And it's one of those games where it's like, oh, you want to play it? Sure, no problem. But I'm not probably going to like be begging it to come out. Not when I got Trash Pandas I can play en route,
Nice. Well, I haven't really played SpaceCorp, but what you said now, it's questioning. It's making me question what exactly, because you mentioned very high swings, TC, and that's not something that you usually mention. I mean, let's see here. A swingy game. Another way to refer to a swingy game might be a game that is balanced on a knife edge, or a game. What's one of the phrases you use, Andy? About like games where the game state is very volatile.
Like fragile.
Sure, fragile. Would you use that, TC? And
it's like. Okay, the only reason I was able to catch up in the third era was that I made an exploration and I found 2 sites that one was a production 3 and one was a production 2. And once I threw industries on it, it was like a 7 trillion production every time I did a 2 production there. And I just kept grabbing production cards and throwing it down. And it just happened I found those two tiles in the same star system, and I was able to execute that and get the cards I needed to pull it off.
Yeah,
that's what I mean by like random and swingy. Like that would not have happened if those tiles hadn't flipped up and the cards hadn't come up that I could have grabbed to like execute that as well as I did. And that's what if I was doing like 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, and that made up like the 30 points I was behind on Carrotia, who ended up beating me by 11 anyway.
Yeah, I hear you, but it sounds like those things that you're calling swingy were totally out of your control and other players' control. I think maybe, Andy, what you mentioned before was fragile being something that can be impacted, like an economy that can be impacted by players' decisions more so than just like a random flip.
Yeah, the biggest thing in SpaceCorp and the randomness really is like the card draw doesn't seem even that random to me. Like it is, but it isn't. But the exploration tiles can really matter. Yeah. I mean, the odds of probably finding 2 really solid production worlds in one system are fairly low. Like, when I played it, I'd usually get maybe 1 production world, but then you'll get like a water world that's a pain in the butt to build on and things like that too. So yeah, I mean, since it is an exploration game, you do get that sort of like exploration randomness. So, you know, I think the way to think about it maybe is if you think about Eclipse, when you're laying down the first hexes, you can lay down one that's like, oh, this is going to kickstart my economy, or, oh, yay, this has like a moon that sucks. Like, that can't happen. But that's kind of how the exploration component goes. I suppose the way to get around that too is some of the sites you're going to go to have a lot more tile spaces than others. So if you go to like Jupiter as your first go, you've got a lot more options versus if you're hanging around in the asteroid belt, there's maybe like one tile per area. So you're going to have to spend more time trying to move around to get to them. Whereas if you're in a big system, you kind of have a better chance to kind of, you know, play the draw a little bit on that. But yeah, there's some randomness in it. I don't think when I played it, I don't think the randomness is uncharacteristic for what the game is and what it's trying to kind of do.
Cool. I still just really need to play this game so I can actually say something about it. So,
well, that's my final impressions on it. As I said, I enjoy playing it. I like it.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just, you know,
very
I can see,
interesting perspective that you've had, TC.
I can see playing this with certain players. And it just be like just throw the board on this, flip the table. It's too random and too swingy. I'm like, well, it fits this theme. It's not too bad, but since you don't like it anyway, I can see where you think it's really, really, really bad. You know?
Yeah. When you've kind of turned on a game, a lot of times when you've turned on a game in your own head, you just start like picking it apart, and it's like, you know, these things, like a lot of things, you know, that I've hated in previous games. You were mentioning how exploration can be random. You know, so, like I've if I like a game and it has exploration and I'm like, ooh, it has exploration, which I normally don't like, but I like it here. You know, it's just all has to do with like that sort of overall perspective.
Well, and I think where this game will be good is if you have people that maybe aren't, you know, big hobby gamers and stuff, but they're into that kind of hard science, not sci-fi, but, you know,
like a companion to Terraforming Mars, maybe.
Yeah, like something along those lines. Like, you know, like the game somewhat gives a similar feel to High Frontier, but you don't already need a PhD to play it.
So easy High Frontier, easy rocket science. This is easy rocket science.
Seriously, that's kind of what it feels like, but it has a kind of hard sci-fi component to it. But I think and the other thing is with the 3 changing board states, it just makes teaching so easy because it's like, teach the first board. Okay, now you know how to do the first board. Here's some things we do in the second board. Here's what we do in the third board. So I think the game is going to lend itself to, you know, maybe lighter, you know, gateway to light, you know.
It's like a long game. And
we played
long game can make...
It's like 3 hours. I think our plays have been like heavy. 3 to 4 hours at least on it. I mean, that's doing all 3 eras. I mean, you can play in each era separately if you wanted to, but you know,
which is like the opposite of your designs, Tom. At least from my perspective, you've made games that I could play in 10 minutes that feel heavy.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, I consider that a compliment. Yeah, I didn't know how you would take it, but to me, that's a positive thing to say. So you can fit all that in. That's pretty crazy.
I like seeing different games come out from G&T, so I really appreciate the game for what it is. And I don't see any other company but GMT to try to publish a game like this. So kudos for GMT for, you know, getting it out and publishing it. And
it's a real big departure for you, TC. Yeah. Normally, you know, you're not that positive on GMT.
No. Oh no, it's you know, I really hate them. They're just awful, overly complicated, 4 rule books, spreadsheets. They're garbage. Garbage. The G and GMT is garbage, and I'll think what MT stands for in a minute.
It's CC, the old fanboy, right?
Yeah, that's me.
You made a case for this one that makes me really excited to play it. So
yeah, I'm really curious to hear what you think about it, Joe. It'd be really cool to hear what you think.
Sounds good. All right, I'm going to sneak in a review here before Trent has kind of a fitting end to our reviews. I'm going to be talking about the newest at least the newest game that I've played from Uwe Rosenberg, the sweetheart designer of Agricola, which is, was at one time my top game of all time, still a sweetheart game for me. So I'm talking about Reykholt, which is Icelandic veggie tourism. And really, for those of you that speak in terms of mechanisms as opposed to theme, this is a 3-worker placement game. Think Agricola, all creatures big and small. Think a couple of years ago or last year, I forget, Nusfjord, the Norwegian fishing village game. You just got 3 workers, and that'll be it for the entire game. The game is very scripted in terms of turn order. There's no spot for turn order. It's just you take your 3 actions at the end of the turn. Turn order passes to the left, 3 actions, and that's the basis for the game. But the way that you are advancing in this game, and we have here in the chat somebody who I'm pretty sure enjoys Uwe Rosenberg's previous game. This is I'm thinking of the gates of Loyang. The way that you advance in this game reminds me of At the Gates of Loyang, where there is a linear track and you're trying to be the furthest on this linear track. And the way that you advance is by sort of paying the cost for each spot. However, in Reykholt, there is, I think, it's 5 different types of vegetables. And then the way that you advance is essentially you have 1 of each in a row, starting from the weakest. Like tomatoes are the weakest, carrots are the apparently the best. Everybody knows this. The tomato, you need 1 tomato, then 1 cabbage, then 1 the cauliflower, then 1 mushroom, and then 1 carrot. And then now you need 2. And you just keep on moving up this track. But here's the kicker. You can advance as long as you have that to pay, and you just freely advance up the track. But once per round, you will be able to actually take those resources instead of paying them and then continue to advance. So you sort of puzzle out, like, which of these resources am I going to be taking? And for me, at least, and every other person that sucks at this game on their first play, it's always whatever I didn't have. It's never what I needed, what I didn't have, and what I needed. It was just what I didn't have because I wanted to keep getting bumps up the chart. It's a really sweet system. It reminds me of At the Gates of Loyang. It makes it for a crunchy, heavy, hard-hitting decision. Like, you're trying to advance as far as you can. The basics of the game system is simple. You just have these 3 workers. There is some powerful actions that have a flag on them, and they're separated into columns. Once you take 1 flag action in a column, you're not allowed to take any more flag actions. That's about as heavy, that's about as nuanced as the worker placement system gets. But you are potentially going to be acquiring special abilities. There's 40 different cards. You're only ever going to play with 5 in a game, and they're separated by sets A, B, C, D, E. If you've ever played Agricola, they had the complex deck and whatnot. I was very excited by the way that the track works in this game. To me, it is much superior for my play style than At the Gates of Loyang. At the Gates of Loyang, for some reason, wants to make players that end the game with $0 lose. If you don't have $1 single at the end of a round, you can't advance. And that is just, it's so painful. If it's ever happened to you in At the Gates of Loyang, bless you for continuing to play that game, because it happened to me once, and I don't think I could ever even it's just a nasty taste in my mouth. I can't stop thinking about that time when I couldn't advance in Loyang, the 1 space I needed $1 for. Reykholt does it with all these different vegetables. It's simple and easy to get into, but has difficult decisions to make, which makes me feel like this is the light Uwe Rosenberg game for Andy, potentially, and Trent. So, Trent, have you had any experience with it? Before, of course, we talk about TC and how he just has not been inducted into he's not an acolyte of Rosenberg yet. But first, Trent.
I have not played this one, but I played At the Gates of Loyang as a solo game a lot, and I think it's my favorite solo Rosenberg. So I'm kind of curious to try this as a solo, but I have not played it yet.
It even has a campaign that you play solo-wise. It has there's maybe an extra 36 cards or something that are specifically for the solo play that are scenarios and extra other cards. So definitely has some solo stuff.
Definitely.
I'd be interested to see, if you play it solo, what you think of it. Andy, I'm hoping to get you into a game of Reykholt and TC. I suppose we will.
I played Feast for Odin. Does that count?
It's a Rosenberg game, man. That's another tally.
Okay, cool. I'm trying to catch up.
Tom, have you any thoughts on At the Gates of Loyang or any of Uwe Rosenberg's games that you may or may not have played?
So I haven't played Gates. I played.
Reykholt. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I haven't played that either. I played. I played Agricola. I played Le Havre. I played the one with the monks.
Or Labora, yeah.
Yeah. I had a big Rosenberg phase where I was really into those games, and I used to play Agricola all the time, solitaire. I think I like Le Havre the best of them. Yep, I haven't played them in years. But, you know,
it was a phase.
Well, it was a phase, and it was a phase because I was really into Euro games at that point, or those style of games anyway. And I was trying to make those style of games, and then I started making war games. So now that's what I play generally. So
okay, so that's maybe the other end of your spectrum there. You've got Euro or war games.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, categories are useful when they show affinities between things.
Yes.
And they're less useful when they exclude things. So, I mean, what's a Euro? What's a war game? I don't know. I like some games.
Are corn games Euros or war games? I mean, tell me. I
haven't played any. I don't know.
That's honestly, I'm not sure. So, I mean, I agree with you completely. What you said, categorization is a tricky wicket.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially as the hobby grows, because areas are connecting and working with each other more and more and in more interesting ways, to where there's a lot of games that are kind of hard to classify as one thing or another.
When I first started podcasting with Joe, he's like, "You play a Rosenberg?" It's like, "Yeah, I like Rosenberg. I like him a lot. I played Babel. I love that game." And it's just like crickets. I'm like, "Oh, you mean like the other stuff, like a Grick?" No, I just play Babel. I like
which is like Rosenberg's war game.
Yeah.
I have a close friend whose least favorite game she has ever played is a Rosenberg game, but that's Bonanza.
The bean game.
You mentioned Bonanza to her, and she I've never seen it's almost pure hatred for a game. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, you should say the same thing to Chris and say Imminent Domain and see what happens.
Aww.
I love Imminent Domain.
I know. I just wanted to bring it up, but yeah, I like it. But she's like, I hate that game. All I do is mine rocks in space. It's boring. It's so funny.
Yeah, I can see that aspect. All right. Well, finishing up our reviews is Trent who put a bookend on a pretty big commitment.
Yes, I have played a full campaign beginning to end of Gloomhaven, so I'm going to give a full campaign review of Gloomhaven.
I think you're like one of 10 people who've actually done this.
I think we played through every available side quest that we unlocked during the campaign. I mean, I probably have played Gloomhaven more than all but maybe 100 people in North America.
That's awesome.
Played a lot of Gloomhaven. All right.
I'll join you in the future when we actually finish Seafall in the 2 years it's going to take.
Yeah. So, Gloomhaven, for those I'm assuming most of the listeners are at least somewhat familiar. Gloomhaven is a dungeon exploration campaign game. You have a hero. The heroes in this game are represented by little individual decks of cards that are different for each hero. Each hero, you're able to select a small subset of those cards. Each of the cards have an ability on the top and the bottom of each individual card. On your turn, you play a pair of cards. You're going to do one of the two abilities on the top and then do the bottom ability on the card you didn't choose. So you do the top of card A and the bottom of card B, or the top of card B and the bottom of card A, and that's your ability for the round. The challenge of the game is you have a number of hit points. You do get hit by the bad guys on the map. It's a dungeon exploration game. You're also somewhat time limited by the fact that your cards gradually go away during the scenario. You have to eventually rest to get cards back that you've used. And when you do that, you permanently lose one of the cards. By permanently, I mean just for the rest of that scenario. You don't lose them for the campaign. You get them back at the end of the scenario. Your character levels up, and what that does is it unlocks two more options for your cards in hand. So, say a character has 9 cards available, or has a hand of 9 cards. You start with a pool of 12 to choose from. Then each time you level up, which basically happens roughly every scenario, every other scenario, or every third scenario, or every fourth scenario, depending on the hero, roughly, because it's an experience points-based system, and some heroes are much better at gaining XP than others.
Yes.
You get to add a card to your pool, and generally they're better than what's already in the pool. They're almost always ones you want to immediately start playing with. So you swap in out of your hand of 9 or whatever, you take out one, usually the worst one, and put in the new one, so your character feels better. What that effectively means is once every 4 or 5 rounds, you're doing something better than you were doing before, generally. The scenarios are, like I said, it's a dudes on a map game. Each scenario takes maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours once you know what you're doing and you're familiar with the system. Characters level up and they eventually retire. Every character comes with a life goal, life ambition. Once you achieve your life ambition, you retire. And then there's like this weird, it has a subtle way of keeping the character kind of alive within the campaign, because they get random events that are added to the game that are associated with the character that's retired. So you get this little hint that they still exist in the world, which is kind of neat. Mm-hmm. All of that, the campaign part of the game, I really enjoyed. I thought the campaign parts were interesting. I enjoyed the leveling up of the characters. Later on, as you go through the campaign, you get the ability to literally upgrade the cards by applying stickers to it. I thought that was interesting. It did a very good job, probably the best I've ever seen in a board game, of giving the idea of character progression and character permanence. Like, this is a living world, and you're playing in a part of it. I've never felt that in a board game. That came the closest to a role-playing game I've ever felt in a board game. I felt that was really executed really, really well. At first, during the campaign, maybe the first 5 scenarios, I enjoyed how the scenarios worked. I felt it was fun. Making the decisions for the characters in the top and bottom was interesting. But the problem is the scenarios are pretty repetitive. And they get real repetitive after a while. A lot of them are just kill all the dudes. So you have this map, and there's these enemies, and they really aren't that distinct from each other. And you just run through the map and kill everybody, and you win. And you get some sort of reward, and you go to the next one, and you do it again. You do the next one, you do it again. Occasionally, the scenarios change up a little bit. But still, the gist of it, you end up having to kill 80 or 90% of the guys in the dungeon just to stand on some tile for 2 rounds or something like that. A lot of them just simply boil down to kill all the dudes or kill almost all the dudes. And so the pitch of the game is the game will feel different when you switch characters. And it does for maybe the first scenario or 2 with the new character. Then it's dull again. My feeling is, at the end of this, everybody I was playing with was just ready for it to end.
Oh, wow.
Wanting this to be done. And we had all enjoyed it deeply for maybe the first quarter, and then we got bursts of enjoyment when we'd unlock a new character or something significant would change in the campaign. But a lot of the scenarios ended up feeling like a slog, and especially near the end, we were like, we just need to finish this. And near the end, we had to get to prosperity level 7, which, if you're playing the game, that just means you have to do a lot of side quests, basically, near the end. You had to get there, so we were just churning through side quests trying to get more prosperity, and just will this end? We wanted to feel like we had finished it. But it wasn't fun near the end for us. I feel like Gloomhaven, the individual scenarios are fun for a game where you play it 5 or 10 times and then you're done with it. I think the overall campaign ideas are great, but I think the scenarios are just too repetitive, and a lot of the gameplay is too repetitive to last for as long as it does. And I think my experience has been is that a lot of groups start off like gangbusters with it, and then this falls to the side because they feel it too. I might be wrong on that, but I think I've noticed a lot of groups that I know, and I know at least 3 other groups that were at some level going through this. They all started flying through it, and then it would die off. And I think it dies off because they start feeling that repetition that I felt. Now, there's a ton of cool things in Gloomhaven, don't get me wrong, but I ended up feeling like it didn't ever... The scenarios were too repetitive and never offered enough of anything new to really make the end of the campaign as enjoyable as it could have been. And I feel like this game is 75% of the way to something really amazing, but the scenarios needed more work or something. I don't know. I'm not a game designer. I don't know what needed to be fixed, but I'll say the last third of the campaign was dreadfully dull. And that's my take on it.
How many total sessions did you guys have?
My notes say somewhere around 55.
Wow.
It's a lot of games. Yeah, we were at about 32 or 33, and then external factors kind of forced it out. So I guess Gloomhaven for me was a phase, and it's the distant past now. So
well, I mean, that's kind of been my question about Gloomhaven. I don't want to go into too much depth with it, but is the game just too much? For it just takes so long to do it that either people burn out or life happens. I mean, a lot of people don't finish a lot of legacy games because if someone moves away, someone gets busy.
It's legacy in general, dude. Like, I have got to the point where when a legacy game comes out, I don't think I'm even going to pay attention much anymore because I've got legacy games that I need to play. And I'm like, okay, these legacy games need to get played because I'm really excited about them. They've got very positive responses, and I've never touched them, never cracked them open. I have people that I want to introduce Gloomhaven to, especially since I do want to be able to, try some of the characters that I didn't get a chance to try starting, because I agree with Trent that that's really the most, the novelty of a new character is the most exciting thing of play of Gloomhaven. But it's like, how many RPG groups fall apart after 5 to 10 sessions?
Yeah.
Like, in my experience, about the vast majority. Like, I have not seen an RPG group really stick around for much more than that. I would say maybe not 5 to 10 sessions, but 5 to 10 months. And you might play a lot in those 5 to 10 months, but like, that's about how long people, like, all of these people that have all these different routines can maintain that routine that facilitates an RPG group. Something changes in somebody's routine, and then now you all have to adjust, or you all you all just kind of like, well, it goes to the back burner, right? This is fun, something we do for fun. So like, if Mark or Jenny or whoever can't make it to RPG night, you're not going to be like, dude, and that sort of negative reinforcement can't happen. It can't make it work because we're doing this for fun, right? And a lot of times it's external factors. It's just so hard. And I feel like the hobby has pushed so much towards those games because it's like, oh, well, this game has a beginning and an end. It's not just one that will go on my shelf because my shelf's full, right? You guys still keep selling games to people who have full shelves. This game goes onto your shelf and then foreseeably it's going to be gone. But it's just, we see where we're at now. At least I see where I'm at, and I have five legacy games at least that I want to play, haven't touched, haven't cracked open, read the rules multiple times, and I know what to look for in a group in terms of what things to like. What are sort of the red flags? What are the the things that are like sirens that are like, this person might not, anybody who's even the least bit non-committal is like, nope, we're not going to touch that game because I don't want.
So that's like all adults.
Yeah, like, I don't want to hate you, but yeah, once you become an adult, you have priorities to your way of life. Like, it's almost like this sort of like a college marathon style. When the guys on the floor where I lived watched every single Stanley Kubrick movie in succession, and that was amazing to see them do that. But it's not something that any adult's ever going to do. When you say like, let's watch that for an entire weekend and stay up, it's like, why? And that's what it's like.
That's why I got into board gaming as an adult instead of playing role-playing games, because I could do that without having commitments week by week by week.
I have played through most or all of 5 different legacy games. And I will say that the one I felt was the most consistently interesting and innovative of all of them was Seafall.
We signed a blood pact, and we are still playing that sucker. We are going to finish it. I should show you the picture. We have the blood pact was, if any of us broke playing it, we'd have to lose a piece of our favorite board game. That was our Seafall blood pact.
Seafall does the most interesting stuff of any legacy game I played.
Do you like it?
Okay. That's a tough one to answer because I think Seafall scratches a particular itch for a particular type of gamer. And I think that Pandemic Legacy, definitely both seasons of it, have a more broad appeal than I think Seafall would. I think Seafall, of all the legacy games I've played, could be the one that people hate the most. And I mean I could see people hating it.
Yeah.
I mean, hatred for that game. I could see it. I don't think I could ever see someone hating Pandemic Legacy, but I could see people hating Seafall. And I mean just like, I will never play this again. You might as well burn it type of hate.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I'd ever see that with Pandemic Legacy. So that's a hard question to answer. I like it very much. I think I'd want to play it with. I would play. That's probably the only campaign game I can think of I'd play through again, but I'd want to play it with the right people.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, we have one guy who signed the Blood Pack. He calls the game Swingfall.
That's a good name for it. And another thing I would also point out is, you'll know whether you're the right kind of gamer by the time you've completely finished the first scenario.
Yep.
You'll know by the very, very end of it, and you're putting it away, you'll know whether this is for you or not. And if you're thinking, what just happened and this is nonsense, then you probably don't even bother. But I'll say it does some very innovative stuff. So that's my take on. I think I've played through most, if not all, of the campaign of 5 different Legacy games.
Wow.
Yeah. And I would say Seafall was probably the most interesting to me. And I know it's the one that everybody seemed to have hate, but yeah.
You got me over here. We're still doing it. Hi, Trent.
Yeah.
Cool.
So there you go. All right, let's move on.
All right, that was our reviews. And now it is time to introduce the world to the inner workings of Tom Russell. So Tom, let's get started here from your Euro phase and prior to that. Now, you've been a gamer, it sounds like. You know, I'm hearing that you were a gamer that tried to design Euro games at one time. I am hearing that because this is a phase that you look at, that might not be what you're doing now. And you mentioned war games as well. Let's roll back all of that and let's tell the story of your innocence. Sorry.
I got into the modern games kind of by accident. Like a few different things happened kind of simultaneously that pointed me in that direction. Like we were hanging out with a friend in a store in Ann Arbor, which is a college town in Michigan. And there was a comic book store, and I went down to look at some back issues for New Mutants, and they had these board games. It's like, what are these games? I've never heard of these games. Why is the designer's name on the box? Why is there this giant version of a game called Catan? What's going on here? You know, and a few different things all at once kind of pointed me to these games, and I was curious about them and started digging into them. And I was, at that time, I've always been a very creative person, but I had trouble finding something where I had an audience and where the thing engaged with people. And, Mary and I made feature films. I've written prose fiction. I've designed video games, which I programmed very poorly. And in fact, part of my very first game design as a board game was I had a video game I wanted to do, and I figured by the time I can program this, just get this working, it'll be, 8 or 9 months, and then I can play it and see if it works, and then have to spend days, fixing one little thing or another. If I can prototype this physically, then I can play it and get the balance right, the game right. And I started with that, and I was made to change right away. And I was like, oh, this is better than staying up all night and then finding I screwed something else up. I just changed a word in the rules, and the thing's different. And so I started I was playing the Euro games, and I started designing Euro games.
That was where you started then?
That was where I started. Okay. I mean, at the same time, I was running a D&D campaign, actually, which I enjoyed that. We had, 60 sessions, so we did okay. But, and actually, I want to touch on this real quick for the previous conversation there. Mentioning, so I haven't played Gloomhaven or any of the Legacy games, right? And Trent mentioning that it's all kind of kill the thing. That does sound super repetitive, and I think that one problem with a board game emulating a role-playing game is you're not going to have that kind of player creativity and spontaneity.
Yes.
As part and parcel of the role-playing game. We had a session where, for the better part of a session, the players in this D&D campaign chased a sandwich down a mountain. This is like a 5-hour session. I had a dungeon for them to explore, but they weren't interested in this sandwich. And I gotta say, they got more enjoyment out of chasing this sandwich and chasing the goat that stole the sandwich than they would have out of my dungeon.
Nice.
I've had sessions like that before.
I mean, that was pretty much every session that we had. I mean, anything I tried to do, the players would do whatever they wanted, and that was great. That was where the experience is.
Yeah.
I don't see how a board game can emulate that.
I had an RPG session one time where everybody spent the entire session gardening.
and then you played Agricola afterwards.
Yeah. So
how do you? Go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that I was running that campaign while I was trying to get my first Euro games sold, and I couldn't sell them. Like, no one would buy the Euro games. I'm not very good at pitching, and I think there's a couple different things I kind of latch onto as reasons why the Euro games I didn't take off. Okay. And some of those was that I think the games I was trying to design would have been really exciting, like in 1997, and were less exciting in like 2012 or 2010. But I did a war game kind of as a lark, like I'll be the guy who does Euro games, and I'll do this one war game as just as a lark, as a gag, as like just to try it, just something, and that sold. And so then I did another one, and that sold, and I became a war game designer. Like, I kind of accidentally became a war game designer, and then I started playing war games mostly because that's what I was designing. I want to borrow, I want to look at things that will help me with that career path, as it were. So, I mean, other than some of the Winsome games have sold, obviously, because I sold them to Winsome, and some of them have sold to other companies, be licensed to other companies. So, like the train games and the war games worked out well. Anything that was more on the Euro-y side, it really didn't. And that's.
Now you kind of shifted into Winsome. You threw out Winsome there. Now, is that part of your Euro background? Is this something that developed from the wargamer Tom Russell? Is where does Winsome just fall in? Because I don't see where that lies on the spectrum. And I guess it's like, the Winsome games, those ones, like I've got Winsome games, you've got Winsome games. Oh yeah, those Winsome games that we've all designed and submitted to Winsome, and yeah, they buy them. Yeah.
So, how I got involved with Winsome is I was looking at, I wanted to someday make a living at this. Mm-hmm. And I figured the way to do that would be for Mary and I to publish games ourselves. And to do that, I would need to have some kind of reputation, and I would need to have developed my craft. And I looked at, I need someone who is good at developing games, that knows games more than I do. Because one problem I had at that time especially is, board games, they're kind of a luxury hobby, and I did not have a luxury income. We were very close to losing the house more than once. But we still have the house. I'm sitting in it, so we did okay. But at the time, we weren't buying games very often, so I couldn't really get into what all was going on in the hobby. I wasn't really being exposed to a whole lot of different games, so I need someone who was. And I said, Winsome, they're good developers. They have a reputation as good developers. And I was bad at pitching, but Winsome, if I can get them to say yes to a game and they're able to sublicense to someone else, some bigger publisher like Rio Grande or Capstone was around at that time, but Capstone's picked up one of the Winsome games I did. Then I kind of got that foot in the door, and I don't have to do the pitching, and I have someone who I can trust and work developing, and I can learn from them. And so I designed my first Winsome game specifically like I want to be in business with Winsome. This is why I'm designing this game. That was Northern Pacific. So it was a very mercenary impulse that got me to do that. But you know, it turned out. It worked out.
Having
okay.
played Northern Pacific, there's just like nothing. I mean, it's not like other Winsome games. Trent, how did you describe Northern Pacific after playing it the first?
It's a social experiment.
So it's so unique and so it's so clean and so compact. It sounds like you really approached it from a like, I want to design games for this specific design house. It makes sense the way that you were saying. I mean, at that time, you could see that as like that was the ladder that you chose to climb, and that makes perfect sense. What is
Martin Wallace said that in an interview once, because he had said he had designed some game and they're like, so why did you go from like Age of Steam to this? And he's basically like, because I have to eat.
Of course, you want, like, and you mentioned just designing the craft, like you can respect, and like I think this sort of will come up later on, but like when you've got folks that respect a craft, I think I'm already starting to answer some of the questions, Tom, that I've asked you for you later, but because you don't just work as a designer, you also work as together with Mary, who sounds like is kind of the brains behind the business. And maybe she should start pitching your games, Tom. Maybe that's what's missing here. What I was gonna say is like, what Winsome games did you play? Winsome games to get ready for this? Did you what was kind of your how does one say, all right, I haven't designed anything like this, but I'm going to design a game for this specific developing company. When in Rome, is that kind of how?
Well, I had played a couple of Winsomes. The one that sticks out is Chicago Express or Wabash Cannonball. And I said, I really like this. I want to work with this company. And I kind of struggled at first because I had a lot of math anxiety. Because it's, like, what if I have the values wrong in these cities and whatnot? What am I going to do? And there were two things that kind of came together at once. One was I played Paris Connection, which is such a very simple game. It takes longer to set up than it does to play, which I think is the problem with it. But it's such a very simple, streamlined game. And that kind of got rid of a lot of that anxiety of like, how am I going to do a Winsome game? And I said, well, I can do a simple, streamlined game. I can take this stuff with the emergent player alliances and turn order stuff that I like in games like Chicago Express, and I can express it in a very streamlined way. And the other thing is, one of my favorite movies is Once Upon a Time in the West.
Yes, me too. Woo!
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Everything is great about it. And the plot of that movie, I mean, it basically is the guy thinks that the train is going to come through this part of the area, so he's going to build a town there.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't turn out so well for him.
No.
Once Hank Fonda got involved, but
yeah, and those blue eyes, just those blue eyes.
Oh, I'm hearing in my head the guitar riff when he shows up too. That's great.
Mm-hmm. And the harmonica haunting.
Yeah, I thought the idea of I know where this train's going to go. I'm going to put something. I'm going to invest here. Put a stake here, see if the train comes here. So, well, I can make a game out of that, and I can use that to make this game with the emergent alliances and that eventually became Northern Pacific. Now, the version I gave to Winsome, the map was about half the size of the Winsome map. Because I didn't really know the craft as well. Okay. And it was like, I can't really give details as to, this was different, but just experiencing like, wow, this is so much better than what I gave them. This map takes the promise of what I had and really delivers on it. And I learned so much from that, from experiencing that version of the game and then that map. And that was the first Winsome game, and it was I thought it was the second game of mine to be published, and Yeah, I've done 4 or 5 games for them since. Hang on.
It just blows
6?
my mind. 6. Okay, wow.
Is it 6? Wow. Yeah.
Blows my mind to hear that one of my all-time favorite movies, and actually for a long time, Like Agricola was my #1 game. Once Upon a Time, it was my #1 movie. To hear that was what inspired it, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, like just trying to like you owning the land, you know, like you anticipate, you know, there being value in where you're going, but really that value is not guaranteed in any way. That's what makes Northern Pacific, as Trent said, the social experiment of like the alliances, as you said, these emerging alliances. Wow.
As long as we all agree that it's a game. Because the thing that irks me, people tell me it's not a game. It's like,
oh, it's definitely a game.
Yeah.
Well, do you think, Tom? You know, it sounds like when you designed it, like how long did it take when you first designed it? You're talking about like having the map in a game that takes like what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes tops.
Yeah. So I mean, once that came together, it didn't take that long to design it, and the playtesting was pretty rapid. Because the thing is, when you have a game that takes 5 or 10 minutes to play, you have a game night, a playtest night, you know, in a 2-hour span, you play that a lot of times.
Sure.
You know, compared to playing a game once that takes 2 hours. So that part of it was a fairly rapid development, but then I gave it over to Winsome, and then, you know, 18 months later, the game came out. So, I mean, they did a lot of work on it. And it was maybe 7 or 8 months after I gave it to them that I met John Bohr, because his whole thing is he wants to meet all the authors of his games in person when he does business with them. So he actually came up to Michigan to meet me and Mary, and went to a little place, got Reuben sandwiches, and told me all sorts of great stories, and showed me the new map, and it was just a very charming guy too, very charming, very smart businessman. But at that point, they pretty much had it what ended up being published.
Sure.
At that point, but you know, he took that. But actually playing the game with the map being twice as big, twice as many connections, did not actually increase the playing time, which I thought was fascinating. It made the decisions meatier and gave you more decisions to make, but it still just remained a very quick game. It didn't double the length of the game, which is what you think it would do. And it was just, I don't know, it's a little miracle.
Certainly is. I mean, having played that game, it pleases people that have never played games before, while it still somehow resonates with the most jaded of gamers who we have on this podcast. That's Trent, has played, and yeah, played games by accident. That yeah, more games by accident than I have played in my life. So
I was playing Acquire in my neighbor's living room when I was like 8. And it's like an old Avalon Hill. Yeah, so I go back. I've played a lot of games.
So what a great story of origin. I mean, thank you for sharing that, Tom. Other folks, what do we have here? Let's open the door.
So, questions. So kind of like, at what point did you and Mary sit down and really, you know, think, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to form Hollandspiel? How did that kind of come about?
So there are like 2 answers to that question, because almost immediately we're like, we're going to eventually do a company where we're going to publish games. We thought it was going to be Euro games at that time, and we thought it'd be funny if we had a name that sounded like we were a European company. And her last name being Holland, I was like, we'll call it Hollandspiel. And maybe that's less funny now than it was, you know, 7-8 years ago whenever we came up with it. But it turned out okay for us. But when we actually were going to do it, at that point, we had done work for a couple different war game companies that used a print-on-demand method for folio-style games that come in Ziploc bags.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned basically a lot of the production side of that. The bleeds, the colors, everything that you need to have a sheet of counters and maps and whatnot, and laying out rule books and all that stuff. And we said, well, you know what, we can do this. We can take this model that we've learned and we can apply it to games that we want to do, and we'll have more, and we'll do it our way. And we might make mistakes, but we'll own those mistakes. And if we succeed, we own those successes. And so we were talking about that in pretty seriously at that point by, I want to say 2015. And then, in 2016, we started the company. So, we actually had the first 5 games ready before we took orders for the first game in August of 2016. So we had a lot of the art ready, like earlier in 2016, like January, February 2016 for most of them. I think the one that took longer to get the art done was Infamous Traffic, which we got from Cole that year. But and we spent some time looking at different printers. We tried to find a local printer, and really there wasn't anyone locally who was set up to do it. We ended up going with Blue Panther in California, who I actually was familiar with their stuff because I had a war game published by White Dog Games, and Blue Panther is their printer as well. So I was able to kind of build on that relationship.
Nice. Yeah, it's been kind of fun to watch Hollenspiel because I got introduced to it with Cole talking about an Infamous Traffic and where he was going to publish it. So I kind of remember going on your website in the days where there was like 2 games listed. and now I go onto it, it's just like, I want all of these and I can't buy them all.
We're up to 39 little hex numbers on the spine and 3 non-numbered expansions. So we've been a little busy.
Yeah, related to kind of the print-on-demand stuff that you brought up, like what I've been curious about for a while, because I usually listen to your guys' podcast as well, and so when you talk about like a game did really well for us, like what does that mean in terms of numbers? Because I know like with traditional publishing, if like they can't do 1,000 or more copies, like they're just like, no, we're not doing it because it's not going to be good.
Okay. That is a question that if I answer it, Mary will come in here and strangle me. She does not want me revealing any kind of numbers, and that's a good.
So if we started naming numbers, could you say warm or cold?
No, I could not. I will say that some games have sold quite a few copies. Some games have sold less copies. But the great thing about the method is that we have never lost money on a game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because the way the print-on-demand works is we only make as many games as people order. You order it and give us the money, and then we give the money to our printer. And then what is left of that is our profit. So we have our overhead cost, which is art. After we sell X number of copies, we've paid the art costs off. We are basically guaranteed to sell X number of copies. So, now we have a game coming out later this year where we spend a lot more on the art because it's a science fiction game and those have certain art requirements. So the budget is several times what we usually have for the art. So it'll take more copies to do that, but we're hoping the game will sell really well. So we plan on it's enough to make a living on. I'll say that. And I think we make more than I did when I was working in like middle management. So I mean,
probably
okay for me.
A lot more fulfilling doing this, I imagine.
Oh yes. My job is to play board games. I cannot complain. And our hours are our own, and our time is our own. So we've been full time since February of 2017 or March of 2017. So 6 months after we started the company, we were in the black enough where we could do it full time. Nice. And we yeah, I haven't regretted leaving the rat race of having a paycheck. I spend all day with my best friend. We can go and do things during the day. We go to see movies, usually in the morning or afternoon, where it's only $5 a ticket. That's not bad. It is such a gift to have your own time.
Oh, for sure.
It is such an incredible gift, and I'm so very, very grateful for it.
So, Tom, I got a question for you.
Sure.
So, Andy introduced me to Hollenspiel by saying, "Hey, I got this game. It's cards and sticks and dice."
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about, Andy? It's called Tabletop Battles. I'm like, what garbage is this? Are you kidding me? Sticks. So I actually had a friend order it because I didn't want to take the risk. So we got it, we played it, and Steven became really enamored with your company and ordered Don't Tread on Me is like there's another game you did.
The Supply Lines games, right?
Yeah, the Supply Lines. And then he brought then Andy was talking about a game called Meltwater, and like the next week Steven comes and goes, I got the next Hollenspiel game, it's Meltwater. And we played it, and I'm just playing this game thing going, I just wouldn't, what if I was shown this game and I was a publisher, I would have been like, what is this thing? I mean, what's the story behind this game? Because I read like the designer notes that the designer put up. I mean, that is such a unique game that I was just, what were your first impressions when this game was shown to you for publication? I mean, there's got to be a story behind this because this game's bananas.
Yeah. So she sent it to us, and I got it on the table, and I mean, I just fell in love with the thing immediately. Like this is really compelling. This is really interesting. There's a lot going on, and it's her first design, and it's like I wish my first design had been. This cohesive. It had pretty much everything there. I mean, we get a lot of submissions. I spent a lot of time going through submissions, and some of them are not as far as long as they should be, and some of them really. Sometimes people send us games because they started with the publishers whose name begin with A, and they moved their way down to the H.
No, okay.
Yeah. And then some people do submit stuff for us that they think it would be right for us, but it's the game's not good sometimes. So there's very few games that we actually accept, and then to get a game like this from a first time design, it really just knocked me over. I was like, this is great. I have no idea if it's going to sell or not. I said to Mary, this might not sell at all because it's not really a war game. It's more like an abstract.
A battle royale came to my mind when I was playing it, where it's just like crunching you in the middle, and you just gotta like just survive as long as you can, knowing you're just all gonna die anyway.
I described it as an abstract with a shrinking board.
Now, I said, you know what? I talked to Mary about it, and I'm like, yeah, we'll publish it because we'll take a chance on something. Whether or not we think it's going to sell. And there's stuff that I've designed that I'm still flabbergasted have sold as well as they have. Like the people getting into table battles, that being like our flagship title for us, that really took me by surprise.
The war game without a map, or basically.
Yeah, it took me by surprise too. I was like, wow, this is just sticks and dice.
Yeah. People buying 4X took me by surprise.
4X is one of, if not my favorite game you guys have published. So
that's very kind. Thank you.
Huh?
Yeah, that's very kind. Not everyone agrees.
Hey, one of my proudest gaming moments is I literally bankrupted Cole Worley at playing 4X.
That's amazing. Oh.
He could not make ends meet, and it was done.
Wow.
I've never seen that game end in a bankruptcy before.
No, yeah. Well, what's funny because like I tend to either play like three types of games as my mains anymore. It's either like train games, now sometimes war games, or just oddball, quirky games. So, you know, like I said, I listen to your guys' podcasts and stuff, and pretty much anytime you come on, you're like, you shouldn't buy this game. I'm just like, no, I'm doing it. I'm doing it right now.
Well, as long as you enjoy, the reason why I say that is sometimes that is we want to match the games to the audience, and we have such a diverse catalog that not everything can be for every gamer. There are, I want to say, 2 or 3 people that own all our games.
Might be listening to this podcast right now. You never know.
Yeah. Others, you know, they own some and not others. You know, they own the war games and not the abstracts, or they own the more Euro-y type games and not the hex and counter stuff. You know, it varies. So we try to we want to match the game. We don't want someone's first Hollandsspiel game to be a game that they hate. And we want them to have a game that they're going to enjoy, so that they trust us and will give us money, you know, in the future, because this is our livelihood, and we want to. It only works if people trust us.
Yeah.
We put out bad games, people don't trust us. Put out games that don't resonate with a particular customer, that customer isn't going to trust us as much. But with Meltwater, we to get back to that, I thought, well, it might do really well. It might. I have no idea, because if I knew how well things would do, if I knew how well something would sell, then all our stuff would sell.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we can take those kind of chances, and I think we kind of have a responsibility with our model to take those chances. We have that power, use it, you know? There are other publishers that have the print-on-demand model in the war game space, and a lot of them are a lot less adventurous. And I don't understand. Like, if you can do anything, why not do it? But Meltwater, it took off. Like, it sold really well, and it's been very popular and very well received critically. And I'm just happy that we published it.
Yeah, I think Meltwater
was
so
really
far
good.
is my favorite Hollandsspiel game. Because when we fired guns on our soldiers, we realized how bad that was. And then I ended up winning the game as a Soviet, but we continued the game. And if it would have continued, I would have been wiped out. And the only people left alive would have been the refugees that we didn't convert on the last section of Antarctica that was left inhabitable. And it was just hilarious. So.
It's a very bleak game. And it's I think it's a funny game. I mean, it's a very serious game, but it's a funny game in the way that catastrophe kind of piles up and everything is worse and worse. And that, to me, is a better kind of funny game than a game with jokes on the cards.
Sure.
You know, but the novelty doesn't wear off for me with that kind of thing.
Yeah, but that was a pretty big that one so far has been our biggest hit, and we've had a lot of fun with it. And just the designer's notes on that, what she was thinking, what inspired her to do it. I don't know if I read it on your blog space or not. It was a really fascinating read, and I didn't know if you were aware of any of that when you were evaluating the design, if she told you why her inspiration was and stuff, because I found that whole thing really interesting, and it made for probably one of the more unique gaming experiences I've had this year.
Yeah, she didn't get into that when she submitted it to us. It was more like when we said, "Hey, can you get us some blog posts so I don't have to write." Because at the time and up until recently, I was doing 2 blog posts a week, 52 weeks a year. That's a lot of blog posts. Now what we're doing is we're reprinting our Tuesday. On Tuesdays, we're reprinting old blog posts, starting with this year, for a while anyway. I'm doing new ones on Friday. So it's just one, cutting that number of stuff I got to do in half, because it's a lot to do, and it's not as much fun and doesn't make money the way making games does. So.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
See, I still like it when Trent and I decided to play Meltwater. It was like kind of a bleak, snowy day.
Mm-hmm.
We were like, let's play some games and cheer us up. And then we played Meltwater, followed by This Guilty Land. And then we're like, wait,
Yeah.
what are we doing to ourselves?
Now we're depressed.
So do you have anything in the pipeline you can talk about? I'm really curious what you have on the horizon.
Are we perhaps leading into the hype section here, TC?
Oh, I don't know. I just want to know what's coming out from Holland, but I don't care what you guys hype. I want to hear what he has to hype.
Well,
I have a few things that I'm working on that are coming out, and stuff from other designers that's coming out. The one of mine, today we released a new game, which is the Tale Battles Gettysburg expansion.
Yeah, brand new expansion.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get another expansion up before the end of the year. My original plan was like, this is selling. Okay, I can do like 4 of these a year, and I did like 2 last year, and I was like, I can't do 4 of these a year. I do like 2 a year, or 2.5 because I did the little expansion in C3I magazine. I have a game called With It or On It, which is a Shields and Swords Ancients series. So it's our Shields and Swords battle game series, which is like medieval games, but we're doing Ancients. So it's going back to Greco-Persian Wars and the Peloponnesian War. And that, I like doing that. Because the stuff that really sells really well for us tends to be the really weird stuff. But if I do weird stuff all the time, I can't do that many games, and I would get burned out on it. So to kind of recharge my batteries, I do kind of, I don't know, quote unquote normal stuff, hex and counter stuff. In this case, is square and counter stuff.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, my wife's a World War I historian and loves it, and she's super excited to get her hands on Brave Little Belgium when I told her about it.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
So I really like. Doing war games is fantastic, and it's got my wife really interested. I don't know if we've got it or not, but when I said, look at this Brave Little Belgium, she took one look at it and said, yes, get this like as soon as possible. We have money because it's right up her alley. So yeah, don't get too weird. You can stick with the war stuff because at least you got one fan. I promise you, especially when you make them about World War I.
well, honestly, we have customers who only buy the normal stuff, and customers only buy the weird stuff. Customers who do kind of a mix. And the way our model works, and the way it works for us as a livelihood, is we figured that if we released 5 games a quarter, then even if they didn't sell particularly well, we'd make enough money to meet all our financial obligations. Now, we've never done 20 games in a year. We've never done 5 a quarter for 4 quarters. We've always done more like 14 to 17 games, depending. But so we, our model does depend on getting games out, and some of those games are going to be more standard games, and they're fun. There's nothing wrong with that, The weird stuff is kind of our flagship stuff that gets people more interested in it, in us as a company. But I'm perfectly happy to put out those other kinds of games that people enjoy. I'm happy to design those kind of games that people enjoy, which is, I do hex and counter games, and I do I do the weird stuff, and the big one I'm working on this year. I should say that one thing is I've been doing more quote unquote normal games this year because I spent like a year and a half doing This Guilty Land, and it was very draining and very exhausting.
Well, right.
yeah. Emotionally and mentally exhausting just with the topic. And so that so I've kind of I'm just going to do some kind of normal games. I'm just table battle expansions. I'm going to do some battle games and just kind of relax for a little bit. But then there's the one big game I've been working on, which I started working on like, I don't know, a year ago, which I'm planning on releasing the end of this year, which is a 6-player negotiation game about Peace of Westphalia.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm
God.
very much looking forward to this.
That's a game it is for 6 players. You cannot play it with less than 6. It is exactly 6 players, which is a terrible player count.
That works well for Dune.
Yeah, I mean there are games that but in today's market, everyone's like, can I have a solo mode? Can I play it? Can I play it with 2? No, it is 6. Now, originally it was 7. It was originally 7, and I was talking to Mary about, like, how are we going to sell a 7-player game? And she said, let's make it 6. 6 is it's a weird count, but it's a normal count because most games go from, 2 to 5, 3 to 6. Most game groups, if they're larger, they'll top out at 6, not at 7. There aren't a whole bunch of 7-player games people get together to play. 6-player games.
They get together to play Diplomacy.
Diplomacy, yeah.
I love that's another game I love. So
just take Italy out of Diplomacy. I mean, really, they're kind of marginal to start with.
Hey, I won with Italy the last time I played.
Well, yeah, we had like a 3-player win, yeah. So
I'm actually not referring to that show.
Oh, wow. All right.
Anyway, okay, enough diplomacy talk. Back to Westphalia.
So it's a 6-player game, and it's asymmetric in that each player has their own goals that they're trying to achieve to win the game. And the thing is that these victory conditions each player has are not mutually exclusive. So multiple players can share in the victory. You can have 3 players all meet their victory conditions. Those 3 players all win. If 5 players do, those 5 players all win. If 6 players do, then the game goes to scoring and one guy wins.
Huh.
So, and really the scoring is kind of lopsided on purpose. So if it goes to scoring, it's because the other 5 players were okay with working really hard to win and then letting the other person walk away with it. So
I am so in. This sounds great.
So the crux of it is, trying to achieve your victory while trying to make sure someone else doesn't do it. And what makes it difficult is that there are 2 players that depend on helping other players meet their victory conditions. So if so Austria, right? They have to hit certain benchmarks, but then they also have to make sure that Bavaria and Spain win. Now, Bavaria doesn't need to have Austria win to win. Austria needs Bavaria and Spain, but they don't necessarily need Austria to win themselves, right? For Austria to win, for them to win.
Sure.
So they're not necessarily the most loyal partners. And the same situation happens with the French, who have to make sure that the Dutch and the Swedish win. But again, the Dutch and the Swedish don't necessarily need France to win for them to win.
Wow. Because everything is just balanced. It's like that, everybody needs to sit down at the exact same time in the circle. You do that like the group trust fall sitting table activity.
Yeah. Now, what gives the game more of its spice is so the history of the Conference of Westphalia, the Peace of Westphalia, that ended the 30-year war and the 80 Years' War, which were fought for 30 and 80 years respectively. And all the people involved just want these wars to be over because they've been fighting for so long, and they is such cost economically and in people's lives, and all the farmland was ruined, and they just wanted this thing to be over. But they also kind of want to come out on top, so they kept fighting while negotiating the peace. Like, the peace negotiations went on for a few years, and they still kept fighting major battles and killing thousands of people, because if they were able to achieve a victory on the battlefield, then they had more leverage at the negotiation table.
Wow.
And that's then the guy on the other side of the table, he might drag his feet, because maybe their army out in the field could reverse that and then give them the leverage they needed to get what they wanted. And so there is a a negotiation type of phase where everything is tradable. You can trade anything in the game. And you're following these. There's some steps to follow where certain events happen, which inform those trades. And then you have a military phase where you have your dude on the map and you're marching around attacking each other. And then using that to try to get leverage in the coming negotiations. The other thing about this is that there's an economic aspect to the game, but there's no money. There's only debt. Everything you do accumulates debt. You only get more and more. But there's actually... Let me pull up my little card. You can't... I won't be able to see it. But there is actually a... Where is it? There we are. There is an arrears table where you take the debt that you have and you compare it to your prestige. It's kind of like a credit rating almost. And that determines how much more debt you get on top of your debt in interest and in arrears.
Wow, you've got a game with a credit rating. I think Andy, Andy's about to fall onto his computer here. So.
I'm still in. Hey, what do you think the odds are that Andy and I are going to make 4 other people play this some game?
You don't have to make me play it. This is interesting to me as well. Like I am not by any means outside of this. What really blows my mind, Tom, about talking to you is that when you design games, you are totally cerebral. Like it is about what am I thinking that they're thinking and what type of interaction and weirdness can possibly come out of a situation where I make a decision based on a presupposition that, somebody's going to be willing to help me or, that somebody's going to do something. And then none of that is really set in stone. And so, every decision that you make almost immediately becomes, as you said earlier in the episode, a little mistake, right? We will make little mistakes and little successes, or that might not have been your exact word, but my question, I have a question that I kind of wanted to sneak in, and I'm sorry, I'm going to do it here in the hype, is regarding like the way that your design philosophy and just process involves so much of that headspace. And when you mentioned that when you play a game with Mary, she sits over there with her 3 buildings in front of her and says, "You aren't touching these." And what blows my mind is that, you're talking about interaction that, it's almost like it's not necessarily direct combat. I mean, but there are lots of war games where it is direct combat. But at what level, where does Mary draw the line with your designs and what she appreciates? This just sounds like from her gaming perspective, this seems to me like she's, where does she, what of your designs does she enjoy most?
Hey, Mary.
I figured. I was wondering if you might get her to console her.
I didn't want to mess this up. Hey!
Which of my designs do you enjoy most? They have been published.
Okay.
And I suppose also, how does that inform?
Pardon? I like the train games the most.
She likes the train games the most. She's not as much of a war gamer. She'll play war games with me, and she'll remind me of the game where her picket held off the entire Russian army.
Oh my God,
but the train games. Okay, she's changing her answer now, which apparently is Blood of the Fog because her
train games and Blood of the Fog.
The train games and Blood of the Fog. Okay, well, with the, I think Mary's tastes are less on the war game side and more on the kind of Euro-y side. I don't want to speak for her, but I think that's my general. Okay, I've been told not to speak for her. So
I'm glad that you asked her. I was hoping that you would. I wanted to get her voice under here a little bit, so I hear her in the background.
Yeah. But I like interaction in games, and when I do a multiplayer game, it really has to be about that kind of social dynamics. I think. Mm-hmm. I don't really like. Yes, there's a lot of headspace in my games, but I don't really conceive them as being like. I don't play them in a cerebral way, and I don't design them in cerebral. I'm much more of an intuitive player and designer. It's like it feels right, and it feels interesting, and I can't. I have trouble sometimes explaining the math of something or why something is the way it is. And I ran into that problem when 4X came out. It just, I did what felt right and what I thought was interesting and enjoyable. So that tends to be, where I go when I'm designing the games. If that makes sense.
It does too, because I've played 4X a few times, and I found in that game you can't really play it too mathematically. Like, if you got to kind of consider what other people are going to do or where they're going to go more than just the numbers, because if you kind of go one way trying to exchange currency and then everyone else is like, oh, that was the one we were planning on devaluing.
Oops.
In essence,
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say my little brother is a CPA, and he mentions frequently to me that the stock market is based on feelings, and that's the way that I that's the way that I feel playing 4X, which is that this, there's a lot of feelings here on the table about what's this going to be worth and what potential is there in this currency, and it depends on who's holding, how many are owned, who's holding them, and I certainly am tapping in now to where you went to when you designed that game and how it, at least to me, mimics the actual stock market, the foreign exchange currency chart.
Yeah, I mean, that's the game that's the game I started designing a long, long time ago. That was in my Euro days. And Mary really liked that one and wanted me to dust it off, so I did. And that is one where I felt more compelled to do it. I didn't really want to do it because it's about foreign exchange. I'm not being able to sell this. But I kept being drawn to it, and it was the weirdest, darndest thing where I just continually felt drawn to do the game.
Well, Tom, anybody who's ever been in an airport and gotten screwed by that machine immediately has that thought of, I should be doing this stuff. If that's what it's gonna feel when I'm getting my money and you're gonna take a little chunk and you never know how it's gonna be. It makes sense. To me, the game, it really does click. And many of your designs too as well.
I would say the worst thing that happened to 4X is that it sold so many copies. and I don't mind it selling that many copies from a financial standpoint, but people bought the game who weren't going to enjoy the game. And I think the thing is, I do weird games in a little corner, right? And for people who are appreciative of that little corner. And the thing that terrifies me sometimes is if my weird little thing goes big, and then people who wouldn't enjoy it look at it. There are people who play table battles, and they hate those mandatory reactions. I mean, that's kind of the whole game. But they try to fix it, and it's that's not something that needs to be. It's not to your taste, but it's not something that needs to be fixed.
Sure.
And that's something that I run into sometimes when a game sells a lot of copies. And again, I don't mind. Most people appreciate them. This Guilty Land is sold. This Guilty Land is sold very well, and most people have been very positive about it. Some of the negativity has been this game is really swingy with the deck. The cards can come out crazy. And yeah, that's kind of that's one of the parts of that's an integral part of the game. And I understand a mainstream audience isn't going to be as receptive to that.
Yeah.
Right. So when we get more eyes on us, more mainstream eyes on us, I'm always a little hesitant, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds they're
not.
For those that have a personal vendetta against you, Tom, it seems very clear what to do. Just buy your games, and you'll get this feeling of anxiety, this rush of, oh no, they're buying all 39 bookends. There's at least 6 of those that are mutually exclusive. There is no way you're going to and play this one and this one, and then they'll terrify you. So I think
okay.
But no, this 4X still to me bar none has the best box, back of the box description of what this game is about.
Well, it's such. I had no idea how to advertise something like that, and I thought, well, I'm just gonna thank people for buying it and ask them why they did, and there are companies that don't even have anything on the back of the box, and we don't really need it on the back of the box because our games aren't in stores.
Mm-hmm.
The back of the box generally isn't going to sell people on the game because no one's going to see it until they've already bought the game, unless someone reads the back of the box on YouTube, as happened with 4X a couple different times.
Mm-hmm.
But I like packaging. I like things that have a distinctive look, and I like having like attractive packaging with a nice ad copy on it. So.
Okay, I think we actually have a really good... I had one question I wrote down that I wanted to ask. And this might be a little bit too close to business that you may not want to talk about it, but it's something I've been curious about quite a bit. When I was really surprised when Northern Pacific came out from Rio Grande, because I actually figured Hollandspiel would publish it. How do you know... How do you have a feeling whether or not Hollandspiel should publish one of your designs or someone else should?
So... Generally, every game I design now, I design for Hollandspiel. Now, Northern Pacific. Well, first,
I'm sorry, Tom. I'm just going to pause you real quick. We got some internet connection issues going on right now, so if you could, whenever we get
Hollandspiel for hello.
Sorry, Tom. Yeah, we had some internet connection there. So if you could just kind of take that from right now, every one of your designs, and then I think that's about where we started.
Yeah. So everything I design right now, I design for Hollandspiel. I've designed games for Winsome while Hollandspiel is going on. And the thing with the Winsome games is I design them with the idea that it's going to get hopefully sub-licensed to a larger publisher and get into stores. And there's a couple reasons why I do that and why we wouldn't like republish a Winsome game ourselves. One is that I can't speak for John Borer, but I got a good feeling of what he wants out of sub-licensing something. And I don't think a print-on-demand company that doesn't have store distribution and doesn't really have a lot of international distribution, especially in Europe, our games are sold exclusively through an outfit called Second Chance Games in the UK. So I don't see that being what he wants out of it, And really, I would want those games to have more Euro-type production values, my own games anyway, for those. Because one thing we learned publishing Infamous Traffic is there are a lot of people who bought that and assumed there was going to be a mounted board.
Yeah.
And there wasn't. We had some angry people. We had some people who... we had one guy who opened like a PayPal dispute saying we had defrauded him by not giving him a mounted board, and it was like, I don't want to deal with that hassle. Now, specifically with Northern Pacific, that was licensed to Rio Grande before Hollandspiel started, and I've had to sit on that. I've had to sit on that until it's actually announced, and it was so hard to keep that a secret because I wanted to tell everybody that this game's going to be in stores. And I'm pretty sure more people have played Northern Pacific than any of my other games. I'm pretty sure more copies have been sold than any of my other games, just because of that distribution network and that reputation Rio Grande has, and that they're not a niche. So now, when I started working on Sioux Line, which was a train game that we published end of last year, we were looking at, I was looking at like, should I give this to Winsome or should we keep it, for Hollandspiel? And the way I looked at it was such a weird game. I mean, very off-putting in many ways. That I don't see that being something I'd want to give to Winsome. My relationship with Winsome is to give them games that they then can license to another publisher, and then both John and I mean, we both make money. So that's kind of where I am on that. I have a couple of games that I have the rights to that I don't think we're ever going to publish through Hollandspiel, because they would need miniatures, because they were published with counters before. It's a fantasy game and a sci-fi game. We might actually do the sci-fi game, but we'll find a way to do it. But she wants us to do the sci-fi game. Okay. But the fantasy game, they did it with counters, didn't really sell. It flopped. So that's something I need to do with miniatures, and we have no intention of ever doing minis ourselves or doing a Kickstarter or anything like that. It's just not our model of something we're interested in or have the skill set for. So that might be something that I would, license to another publisher that can do a game with minis or whatever. But generally, the way we look at it is, I'll say another thing, as a freelance designer, you make a little bit of money unless you have a big hit.
Mm-hmm.
You really make enough money to buy more games, and that's about it. As a publisher, we're able to make a living full time. So for us, where my design goes, it almost always is going to go for Hollandspiel, because we're always going to make more money that way, even though we might sell vastly more copies with another publisher who has more distribution and whatnot. And has that store presence and those production values. I'm probably not going to see as much money than us selling fewer copies, but as direct sales. So we're not in that distribution chain where, we sell the game for a fraction of its MSRP to a distributor who sells it to a retailer. We get that money. It's not a whole lot of money for us because our production cost is so high.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's print on demand. But we're still, we make enough to live on, and we wouldn't be able to do that if I was just a designer working with other publishers. Does that make sense or answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have a lane that you view Hollandspiel as in, and sometimes you wind up with designs that don't necessarily fit in that lane, so they'll go elsewhere. Is that generally right?
Yes, that's generally right, and I'm probably going to stay in that lane for the rest of my life. I don't know. I mean,
foreseeably,
the lane's wider than it looks, but because my games weren't this weird as they are now. 2 years ago, I wasn't doing stuff as ambitious or as unusual with the first games I did for Hollandspiel. But the weird stuff is what people got into. So I started doing weird. Just like the war games are what people got into, what sold. So I stopped doing Euro games, started doing war games, and then the weird war games started doing well. So that's what I am doing. What seems to be working, and it also dovetails with what I'm interested in. Like I can do really weird stuff, and I don't have to worry about how it resonates with a super wide audience.
Mm-hmm.
Because a super wide audience isn't going to buy a game with our paper map anyway.
I can certainly relate with that, Tom, because that's what this podcast is. I mean, this podcast is warts and all. So, you're not getting the same production values, from the producer here. You're not getting the same production values you expect from other places. So, it's definitely... It's nice to feel like you can just go in the direction that the wind seems to be blowing you. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm going to be flip-flopping with the wind. Maybe the best way of saying it is, go in a direction, try to head wherever your heart is taking you. And
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to have the fact that people are encouraging you enough to actually develop what you see as being who the hell's going to buy this? Who the hell's going to listen to this?
Mm-hmm. No. Yeah. a big part of why we've been successful is we've been very flexible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we tried different things, and we keep trying different things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but we had the freedom to keep doing that. And I think once we got to if we ever got to the point where we were kind of rigidly defined, that's when the thing would die. And I'm planning on the thing, you know, being our source of income until I retire. So which I'm not doing anytime soon. So, you know,
one quick.
So it's keep the thing alive.
For table battles, right?
Pardon?
I said the minis one is a dinosaur table battles, right? Because we got to.
No. The minis. So there's a fantasy skirmish game I did a few years ago, and it flopped, but I have the rights to it, and I like the game for what it is. I designed it because someone said the publisher said, "Can you do a fantasy skirmish game?" Yeah, why not? I'll try it. And it didn't do well. I also ended up doing a science fiction game because the publisher was trying to get rights to an older game about high-speed hover tanks and couldn't. So I said, well, I'll do one. I'll call it High-Speed Hover Tank. And then I did, and it also flopped. So I'm kind of staying away from like science fiction and fantasy myself as a designer because I don't seem to have an aptitude. I like the games. Maybe just the way that they were sold, because I think, particularly with fantasy and sci-fi games, people don't want thin counters, like thin, flat, two-dimensional counters. They want a miniature or a standee. Mm-hmm. They want a certain quality of art. I mean, there is stuff. They want stuff, you know. And if you can't deliver the stuff, then they're not necessarily going to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of. I don't plan on doing another one in the. You know, I stick with historical stuff generally.
So my final question for you, Tom, just a simple yes or no here. You don't really have to talk much about it. But when you join the dark side, will you still come back to this podcast and you know, like be back on and just enjoy it? I mean, just like I said, simple yes or no will do. Will you remember us when you join the dark side?
The dark side?
When you are
he's already on the dark side.
when you have you know, like become the flagship designer for the next big Euro brand, putting out
Hollinsfield gets bought out
sci-fi, fantasy. Yeah, when Hollinsfield gets approached by Asmodee.
Well, you know, but here's the thing though. With that. Hollenspiel doesn't own anything. Every game is licensed for a short period of time, contractually, from the designers. We never buy a design outright. So if someone like Asmodee, for some reason, some insane reason, wanted to buy us out, they would just be getting the name and no products. And so that kind of that makes that we're safe. We'll never get that offer. You know.
So what you're trying to tell us that you don't think Asmodee is going to come calling and want to make 4X one of their featured titles in the near future?
You just retheme it. Though we theme it to Twilight Imperium. Throw a bunch of minis on it. Some awesome artwork.
Yeah,
and it's your space game, Tom.
Exactly. They'll set it in the Twilight Imperium universe, and there'll be 17 alien currencies.
Pewter miniatures for table battles.
Yeah,
Pewter, taking it back to the old school.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, even when I join some kind of dark side, yes, I would come back and talk about it.
Oh, thanks for accepting that. You should, you know, you didn't have to answer it, Tom. It's great to have you on. It's been fun. But Westphalia, what a great way to start our hype, and a way to derail us back into the topic, back into just picking your brain. I think we're just having a blast picking your brain. So before I guess a way hopefully to transition us into more hype here, Tom, is to actually discuss one of your games that is currently being published by Capstone.
Yeah, I obviously felt that this was an absolutely perfect fit for this episode because earlier today, Capstone announced, I think they'd semi-announced it before, but they officially announced it, that they're publishing one of Tom's earlier designs, Irish Gauge, and that has beautiful Ian O'Toole art. This is a Winsome-style cube rails game, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. I have read the rules. I have not played it, but it looks very interesting. It was on my short list of Winsome games that I wanted to play and had not had a chance to. And the fact that it's coming out in a really nice edition from a publisher that in the past I've had a lot of trust in makes me very excited to pick it up. It's coming out Q3 this year. I'm looking forward to it. Really looks pretty from what I've seen.
It's probably my favorite of my Winsome games, to be honest. Irish Gauges. And the cool bit about it, I'll help with this hype. The cool bit about it is that you have different companies, you're building track for them and whatnot. And one of the actions you can do is a dividend action where you pull bits out of a cup that correspond to colors of cities on the map, and those cities are what pay out. So in the Winsome edition, I want to say it was like orange, brown, and white or something like that. So you pull out 2 orange and a white, then orange and white cities pay out and brown cities don't. And so there's that kind of random, it's more of a, I want to call it a probability element more than a random element, because you know what's in the cup before you blindly draw from it. You can examine the cup before that. Mm-hmm. And there's another action where you turn towns into cities. Now, towns pay income all the time. Cities only pay it when the dividend comes up. So the dividend comes up, all the towns will pay out. Some of the cities will pay out. They match the color of the cube coming out of the cup. Or I think it'll be a bag in the Capstone edition. Okay. I talked with Clay about the components, and it's going to be really nice.
He's a component nut, yeah.
But you can choose a cube out of the bag and say, I'm going to turn this town into an orange city. Well, now you've decreased the number of orange cubes in the bag. And decrease the probability of orange paying out. So there's more orange that will pay out, but it's less likely to pay out, and that's kind of the crux of the thing. And it's a 45-minute, stock and route building game.
Nice. I'm excited to try this one. I love Winsome games in general, just like cube rails games, I guess, are big for me. And to see Clay partnering up, to see your name on the design box after how much I've loved Northern Pacific and been very intrigued by many of your other designs, I'm excited to try this one too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just wanted to quickly mention a couple of games that, a lot of people get their pitchforks out when a Kickstarter game is experiencing difficulties. I've backed... If you look down the list, I've backed a lot of Kickstarters. Actually, when I'm having a bad day, it's one of those. And there's been a couple of games. Therapy. Yeah, Kickstarter therapy, pretty much. It's and honestly, it's because I don't need any games, but I'm not buying a game now. I'm buying a game for the future when I will need it. Which is it's pretty nice how that works out. It doesn't work out though. Anyway, so we're not going to talk about. Don't pick me apart psychologically right now. It's not the time for that. Instead, I just wanted to say I'm glad that I had faith and patience when I was going down my list of back projects, which now numbers, I believe, above 50. And yeah, that's a conservative estimate. There is I was looking at which ones because I check boxes every time they get fulfilled. And, the average percentage of Kickstarter projects that fail to deliver is very, very high compared to tabletop. And so far, 2 of mine that were sort of the single missing check marks in otherwise columns of green are now within a week of each other telling me that they're going to be delivering soon. That's Quodd Heroes, spelled Quodd, a game about kind of moving cubes around imagine kind of the puzzle style game where you're a cube and you want, a certain base to be facing up. A lot of cool decisions I imagine being made there. And it's kind of turns that into a dungeon crawl of sorts. And then Carrotia, carrot with an IA at the end, which especially was strange because the game was delivered, but it was being held hostage in a port somewhere. very strange, but both of those games are now delivering. So I'm glad that I had faith in Carrotia and Quodd Heroes to eventually deliver. Did not, take any of the companies, and in Carrotia's situation, the company even offered refunds. And I was like, nah, you know what? You're telling me the game's there, and I'm glad that I waited. So, having faith in publishers, because I do think that inside this hobby, you mentioned it's a luxury hobby, Tom, and I feel like when it comes down to that, for that reason, it takes so much to make a game and to sell a game, like we've mentioned about, just how many different pieces there are to this process, that like really the people that are doing it are not just, I've never met somebody yet that I thought was just a crook. I think that, I wasn't in upfront or anything like that. So I guess, take my optimism and dash on the rocks, Trent, if you will. But, I don't think that anybody's gone into a project thinking, okay, well, this is going to be it, and then I'm moving to Australia.
Well, and if I've heard right, I believe, though, that as far out of percentage of Kickstarters that, fulfill everything versus, like, just don't. Like, the board game ones have one of the highest percentages of successful fulfillment.
Yeah, video game ones are disastrous. They have a really bad rate.
Mm-hmm. Probably for the reason Tom mentioned earlier, like you spend all night and then figure out that you missed one line of code and it was a waste. Whereas a board game, you just grab that Sharpie. So that's my hype. Let's move to let's see, Weird War Game, and then that will help us to finish it off, TC, with your sort of breath mint. But anyway, Andy, I don't want to say Weird War Game. Wow, how judging I sound. But Andy, when I say Weird War Game, it's because I had to actually Google it, find it to figure out what type of game it was, so I could try to introduce it and transition to it. So
yeah, so actually, because earlier today I'm like, oh, where's the BD or Board Game Geek page? Oh, they haven't made one yet. But this just came through on the GMT newsletter a few days ago. But they announced some new P500s, and most of them were what you would typically expect from GMT's offering, variations, war games, and all that. But they threw this other one that kind of caught my eye called Scramble for Africa. And what it looks like is another game in my lovely, like, happy, cheery themes you can play with people. It's a game about the colonization and exploitation of the African continent. And so it's much more of sort of, from what I can gather, more on the light side. Like they very much said you can play this with beginning and more advanced gamers, but it's an exploration game. So like you explore Africa, turning over tiles, and you have a limited number of actions. So once you find out what's there, it's like, okay, you have a resource. Do you exploit that resource, or do you go further into the African continent looking for better resources? So it looks to have kind of this economic thing. When I saw the playtest copy, it looked like they had paper money, so there's going to be some kind of currency working in it. It said, I think that they're looking to have the board double-sided, so like one will be much more of a realistic Africa exploration, like, the continent and everything. But there'll be another side where it's just absolute random, like you can just find anything. As far as the resources. And I think there might be some goals based on what you pick at the beginning, like, they're sending you in really to look for metals, so gold and tin and stuff like that, or other, maybe instead you're going to do plantation farming, so, bananas, whatever else you might do with that. But it looked to be, just one of those kind of just a little bit different GMT offerings. And I really don't have an exploration style game in my collection. So I'm like, you know what? I'll P500 it. That's the nice thing about P500 is you can really do it when it comes out and then just kind of keep an eye on it from there. And ultimately, if it's like, nah, maybe not, you can just back right out of it and nothing's lost. But out of everything I've seen them kind of jumping out with, this one looked different. Like kind of them trying something a little different than your standard sort of combat sort of thing. So I'm kind of intrigued by it. I'm going to keep an eye on it, kind of see where it goes. But Anyway, that's Scramble from Africa. GMT just hit the P500 a couple days ago, I think.
Be interesting to see how they handle that.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious.
Thematically, that can be a very sensitive topic.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly, that as well. So that's something I'm interested in too. And this is one of the things, like, if you didn't know, when we did like our top 10, I put This Guilty Land as number 1. Like, it was my favorite game that I'd played that year. And I'm just like, and I still don't know what I quite feel about that in a way. But yeah, no, it's definitely with those kind of topics, colonialism and stuff like that. If you do it right, it can be just really, really good. Like, you feel like you've learned something, you've had good feelings, you've had bad feelings. But if you do that wrong, it can be real. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I found the important thing is to engage with the topic seriously and soberly.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a responsibility that I feel is designed to do that. When I was in my Euro game phase, I did a game about bananas and about the banana industry. And the thing is, the history of the banana industry is terrible.
Oh yeah.
I'm a Spanish teacher. That's part of my preparation was in learning about United Fruit, which is like dropping the F-bomb in any country that's actually had them deal there. So.
And my banana game didn't really engage with that, and I'm glad it didn't get published, because if it had now, especially being the kind of designer I am now, I would have been kind of ashamed to have put a game about bananas that didn't really engage with the actual history and the actual suffering. So it'll be interesting to see how this game deals with that, because it's sounding like it's definitely from the colonial perspective.
Yeah,
and
that's one of the things I'm very interested in too, is how they deal with that.
Andy, from the description of it here, from what I'm gathering, like, I think this is going to be like, wasn't there a game called Colonialism that was just like,
yeah,
we're just gonna, you're horrible people if like you, in this game you portray horrible people.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be if they do it right, it'll be one of those games where you feel like, I think you've learned something about how it works, but you may not feel like all cuddly by the time it's over. But I don't know. It's just, I like those games that when they do it right and it feels smart, and thoughtful and provoking, like, those mean a lot to me. Like, I'm very intrigued by that. And so, like I said, when this is announced, there's still not a lot of details out. So when I P500 it, it's like, okay, I'm expressing my interest. I'm going to keep an eye on it because I'm really curious to see how it's all handled in total.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing. We're going to end it here with TC giving a review, or I guess his hype. Tell us what you're excited for, TC. I mean, this is a game that I'm playing constantly online.
Yeah, I know I'm 2 years too late for this one, but after playing SpaceCorp, I was like really wanting to get a good Euro game to the table. I'm like really craving a good Euro because I swing. I mean, I'm like I want to play like something, a hardcore word game, and then I'll like just go completely other way and play like a non-interactive, very dry Euro. And one of my favorite Euro games, if I had to do a top 10, is Village. And I love Incas and Marcus Brand. They're two of my favorite designers for Euro style games. And I have Village in both expansions. And my wife was just looking around. I said, let's find a game to get at some point. And she goes, oh, look at this, Rajas of the Ganges. And I'm like, oh, look at that. It's an Inca Marcus Brand game. Oh, I think I remember Joe talking about this one and liking it. We should really try that. So, I put it in order through Game Surplus to get it. And I'm actually excited because they did those exit rooms I really enjoyed. The Escape, I believe.
Yeah.
I just like those. I like that husband and wife design team for whatever reason. I mean, Village really stuck. It's one of those games that Village really good that came out and everyone kind of poo-pooed on at the time. I'm like, you guys are crazy. This game's fantastic. I can send my meeples to church. They die. You know, I'm burying them. Everything about this game was fantastic, and it always stuck around on our game shelf. And I'm really excited enough to hype it, even though it's an older game. To try it, you know, to
draw on what Tom was saying, TC, because I think that you've got a really good point in that people were like crapping on Village. Is that like once you like when Village won the Spiel des Jahres Kinderspiel Award, the connoisseur one, it saw this huge audience that otherwise wouldn't have seen. And when you get that sort of exposure, you end up with everybody who knows what's wrong with the game.
Yeah, you had cubes and you pulled them up and you took actions and you know, and then like all my meeples. No, the part about the game I hated the most was putting the number stickers on the meeples when I first got this stupid game.
It's like terrifying too because you gotta get it flush because you gotta put that in the bag. You can't be able to feel the sticker sticking out. So definitely,
but. Yeah, for whatever reason, I really enjoyed it. I think maybe that just sitting, I don't like this. We're just going to put him in a church bag or whatever, you know. But I'm really excited about this one. And like Ink and Marcus also did that game called Bugaloop, which is like a kid's Ravensburger game that my son loves. That has a hex bug in it.
Bugs in the kitchen.
Bugs, whatever. I mean, this is fantastic. I love those two designers. I never know what they're going to come up with next, and I feel kind of ashamed for letting this one pass. But I'm going to rectify it and hopefully review it here in the next few weeks.
Very cool. It's one that I keep playing here, TC, and it's really on the not much heavier than like Stone Age. But one thing I love about it, and this is something that maybe it's the feeling that I get when I play certain Euros, but I feel like I've got a certain amount of resources. And with the right decisions, there are sort of rungs on the ladder that these resources will enable me to grab onto. And then they can let me sort of propel myself further. And in essence, even though I'm describing climbing a ladder, what I ultimately feel like I'm doing is keeping myself afloat. You know, I'm keeping myself afloat without sinking below, because as soon as I hit that point where in this game, if you ever have a 0 dice turn, your options are so limited because you have to have dice to do anything in this game. If you ever use your last die, it's such a rough feeling. Just make sure you always keep dice in your inside your wheelhouse because you need to have them. So here's a game that forces me to have dice in front of me. TC, I guess maybe that's what to go in with it from.
Well, then I'm really excited for it. If it's a game with dice that you enjoy, I'm on. So yeah, we're gonna play it. I'll probably give it a review. But yeah, I'm just just an older game. I'm excited for it. I like. I don't necessarily think our hype has to be the newest thing we've seen. It's just like, oh, yeah, Joe mentioned this.
Yeah.
Maybe I should look into it.
Yeah, it can be whatever you want it to be, TC, and I'm glad that you're excited for it, dude. This really is cool. I hope to hear your thoughts once you've actually played it, because your thoughts on Euros always entertains me. Always. in very interesting ways. So, well, thanks, TC, and thanks so much, Tom, for joining us. Andy, Trent, TC, wow, this has been 200 episodes now. And Tom, you just got to join us here for, I hope, what was a chance for you to open your soul and not actually say anything you weren't supposed to say. I think you stayed within the lanes there for Mary's sake.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, hey, I'm going to buy 2 of your games this year, so that's good, right?
Yeah,
I can guarantee Reykholt is going to be hitting my collection really soon. I can guarantee you that one.
Yep.
Very cool. All right. Well, hope that everybody out there enjoyed the has enjoyed this longer episode to help you. If all I did was whet your appetite or absolutely infuriate you with the little short mini unsolicited episode you heard last week, maybe this filled a little bit of the holes in your stomach. But anyway, keep those empty spots there and have a great week of gaming, and catch us next week here on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.